Time is a funny thing. Sometimes time speeds by. It feels like it's flying. That's the word we use to describe it in English. It flies by. And sometimes it feels like it stands still. In some ways, this feels like one of the longest weeks of my life. And in others, it feels like I have been the most places and seen the most people I ever have in a week in my life. And it feels just like yesterday that it was last week Shabbat, and I was walking out of the synagogue when a congregant reached out to me to let me know the news that Hirsch had been found. I'm going to speak accordingly and appropriately because there's so many children in the room right now. But my reaction was that it couldn't be, that it's just a rumor. And it wasn't confirmed on Jerusalem Post, and it wasn't confirmed on Haaretz, it wasn't confirmed by CNN, it wasn't confirmed by anything. But on Twitter and on LinkedIn and in Instagram, you had especially Israeli journalists writing that these 6 names were all found and the condition. So I did something on Shabbat, of course, that I haven't done since October 7th. And that is that I texted John Poland. And I texted John, I can't even write this message. I can't even say what I'm trying to say. But if it's true, what day do I need to be in Jerusalem by? And he wrote back to me that it's not confirmed. He doesn't know. My wife and I were at a simcha from this community, a bar mitzvah celebration, last Saturday night in Motzei Shabbos. And we were standing in the party when it was confirmed, and it spread like wildfire. And I texted John, what night? And he texted me back Monday night, 4 o'clock. And I knew that it would take a yeoman's effort from Saturday night on La Cienega to Monday afternoon in Jerusalem. And I can't tell you how many people were helpful, from the consulate to the people at El Al, to the travel agent that we use here from VBS, to everybody in between, to getting me a seat on that flight. And I publicly apologize to whoever it is that I bumped off that flight for the inconvenience of having to take the Monday flight. The question that I want to ask us today, for us to consider here on Friday night, is I still don't think in Los Angeles time, but I think in Jerusalem time. I stand here during the service, during Cantor Raffi's beautiful rendition of Lecha Dodi, and I know that just hours ago, sitting in a gymnasium in Baca, John and Rachel were standing outside the doors and were welcomed back into the community for Lecha Dodi, as is traditionally done. I think back in terms of everything that we do here, in terms of what's happened in Jerusalem just hours before. I want to ask this very simple question from each of us, for all of us to consider tonight. For whom would you fly around the world? Think about the people in your life, and it ends up being a very simple question. For whom would you fly? For whom would you get a text message and move mountains to make sure you were there for them? And the funny thing about the answer is, what I learned this week is that I would bet that for the people for whom you would move mountains to be there for them, many, many other people would do the same. Because those people carry themselves and behave in a way that engenders love and support from everybody that they meet. So I'll ask you another question. For the people for whom you would move mountains to be there for them, do those people know? Do those people know? I can't tell you how many times over the last 333, 334 days, I have texted with John, John has texted with me, and I have either ended the text thread with "we love you," or he has ended the text thread with "we love you." How do we make these people in our lives aware that we would fly across the world at the drop of a hat to make sure that I stood next to him while he recited Kaddish for the first time? So that I might be accounted among the people who stood in that tent for Shiva. Because I think that I could easily say that that tent, the people who occupied that tent, for those Shiva Minyanim, they are the intellectual leaders of the Jewish people. There's no doubt in my mind. I could have walked around that Shiva Minyan and booked our scholars in residence here at VBS for the rest of my career. I dropped a hint to a lot of different people. This is a fundamental question, not only in the context of this war, not only in the context of the horrific tragedy this week, not only in the context of my personal experience. It's a question that I pondered the entire 15 hours traveling there, as so many people on El Al, as so many people at the airport, so many people at the hotel, so many people on and on and on, nodded their heads, understanding why I had showed up. And so many people thought that I was absolutely nuts. There has to be, for each one of us, people in our lives for whom we would move mountains. It goes without saying, I would hope that these people would be in our immediate families. I would hope that these people be our children. But John and Rachel were there for Blair and me in a way that I can't explain. When two naive American Jews show up in Jerusalem and think it's going to be easy and have two little kids, for a couple like them to say, come to our house for Shabbos dinner, you'll meet lots of American Jewish olim who came here naive, who thought it would be easy, and who are there for one another. They were there for us in a very special way. Their kids, including Hirsch, was there for us in a very special way. This entire Kabbalat Shabbat service, this entire service, from Yedid Nefesh all the way through Lecha Dodi, is about God showing up. And it's supposed to inspire us on Shabbat to leave the synagogue and go be with other Jewish people for Shabbat dinner, for Shabbat morning, for Shabbat lunch. This is why communities have these kinds of practices. It's because Yedid Nefesh, Av HaRachaman, soulmate, loving God, compassion's gentle source, take my disposition and shape it to your will, is how the opening prayer goes. Let me show up for others like you show up for us every week. Like clockwork, let me find my place at somebody's Shabbat table. Let these relationships deepen through this experience, this communal experience known as Shabbat. And if you turn to Lecha Dodi, page 22, Bo'i v'shalom, come in peace, is the way that it's usually translated. But Bo'i v'shalom can also be understood as come to me bringing peace. Let everyone who comes in my door, let everyone who shows up to my tent be someone who intends to bring a semblance of peace to my life. Baruch atah Adonai hapores sukat shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael ve'al Yerushalayim. Blessed is God who spreads a canopy of peace over our people and over God's chosen city of Jerusalem. I explained to people that this past week in Jerusalem was the saddest that I've ever seen it. And this is my 4th time being in Jerusalem since October 7th. It was the absolute most devastating, soul-crushing version of Jerusalem. And it was the very best that I've ever seen the Jewish people. The group that showed up to the funeral, the group that showed up to Kaddish, they didn't travel 15 hours and taxi rides and walk miles to get there. But it felt in some way like, had they had to, we would have all done the same. Standing at that funeral, I believed that had we had to, any of us would have done anything for anybody standing in that crowd. That had we had to, we would have spread the canopy of peace. If only we could have, we would have spread the canopy of peace over that family, over each other's families, over that sacred city that cemetery looks out at. There is a tremendous sadness inside of Jerusalem tonight. And there is a tremendous mission. And the mission that was established this week is that we must be the ones who spread the canopy of peace over each other's homes. We must be the ones to show up when each other calls for help. We must be the ones. We must be the ones. Because as I looked around the thousands and thousands and thousands of people who were at that funeral, there is nobody else. There is nobody else. I said to Blair when I came back, it would be an interesting test if we sat down to write a list of people that I would fly around the world to be there for them when they text me Monday at 4 o'clock. There was certainly in this week a thread of celebrity interest in a kind of sickish way. There were camera people, there were photographers, there were videographers at every turn. Somebody sent around the synagogue the front cover of Danny Gordis's blog, and they put a circle around my face standing in the crowd there at the funeral. People took pictures of everything. And I watched a photographer take pictures during the burial. And I thanked God that there was documentation of our finest moment as a people. That in the darkest of hour, we show up for one another. That in our darkest of hour, we wouldn't let anybody stand alone. And I knew, traveling, from literally the hundreds of emails and text messages and WhatsApps that I received from this community, that you were all traveling with me, that you were all by my side. And when I said goodbye to John, when I said goodbye to him and I hugged him in the tent on Tuesday after morning Shacharit, and said I had to go back. He hugged me and he said, say thank you to everybody in California. And so I stand here as the most humble messenger in the world. And I offer you thanks on behalf of a family whose lives did not work out the way that they had expected, who found themselves on the global stage for the worst reasons possible, who still found a way to express love and hope and optimism and humanity to every single person they met. And if that's not godliness, and if that's not a reason to fly across the world, if that's not Yedid Nefesh, then I don't know what is. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.